Hey everybody, welcome to For Food's Sake, the podcast bringing you down-to-earth dialogues about the food on your plate and its many impacts on people and the planet. My name is Matteo De Vos, and without further ado, let's talk about food. Hey everybody, welcome back to the For Food's Sake podcast. It's now coming to the end of the summer. I hope you had a fantastic summer, if you had one. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started on this episode. It's been a while since we released an episode. We're shifting direction a little bit. From now on, there'll be two types of episodes. There'll be the usual type of episode that you've seen in the past, which is a down-to-earth dialogue between myself and a guest speaker. It's usually around 45 minutes to an hour long, where we discuss a specific topic or a specific background of one of the guest speakers. But now we'll be also introducing, as you might have noticed with episode 16, the most important room in the world, a different format where we'll have multiple people on the show, snippets of multiple conversations that I've had with people surrounding a specific topic, a specific theme, so that we get some different perspectives and some different examples that we can bring to you. There'll be a bit more music in those episodes. They also, of course, take longer to produce. There's a lot more editing involved. Finding the right music and cutting and cropping different parts of different conversations. But I think it'll mix it up a bit. It'll give you some different types of episodes depending on what kind of mood you're in and what you want to listen to. And for me, of course, it's also a creative process. It's a lot more work, but it's also a lot more fun. So having said that, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. This is an episode much like the older ones where I have one discussion with a very special guest. We unfortunately did have a little bit of distortion coming from my end of the microphone, so I do apologize for that in advance. But I'm confident that won't take away from a very interesting conversation I had with this week's very special guest, Rob Greenfield. Rob is an adventurist and environmental activist that has made it his life's purpose to really lead by example in living a truly sustainable lifestyle. Now, what does it mean to live a truly sustainable lifestyle nowadays? Well, Rob is someone that's completely transformed the way he lives over the past half decade or so. He's someone that takes sustainable living to its extreme by living off the grid, by living with minimal material possessions, no credit card, no car. And he's also someone that takes on extreme challenges that many of us would think are inconceivable or impossible in the 21st century. To give you an example, he's taken on a challenge in the past of not showering for a whole year. So, not showering in your typical Western type of shower, exceptions, of course, being that he was allowed to bathe in lakes or in rivers. He also took on a challenge of not buying anything new for a whole year. And in traveling to South America with no money and no change of clothes, just his passport, relying on the kindness of strangers and on the sharing economy. And by doing so, Rob's managed to reach hundreds of thousands of people around the world, and he's been able to spread his actions and his message of positive change to people all around the globe. Now, I met Rob in Paris on his Be the Change in a Messed Up World speaking tour. He gave a fantastic TEDx talk there in Paris, which you'll find in the show notes below and which you can watch after the episode. And I'm really glad to have him on the show. He's someone that's very positive, has a very interesting perspective on the way that we can all live sustainable lifestyles. We'll be talking about his journey into sustainability, some of the crazy adventures that Rob has been on, what he's planning on doing next, and of course, about certain food topics. We talk about food waste, locavore diets, local diets, and of course, what we can all do as individuals to challenge ourselves in different ways to be part of the change that a lot of us want to see in this world. And so now I bring you Rob Greenfield. Rob, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you very much for having me on.
Rob, you've had some amazing adventures and projects over these last few years, working with sustainability and the environment and spreading your actions and message across communities around the world, really. And what I really appreciate, frankly, is that you're you're very optimistic in everything you do, and you really practice what you preach in the fullest sense. But before we get into more detail on what you've been up to recently, I thought maybe we could start at the beginning with a simple question for those that are maybe not so familiar with what you've been up to, and that's how you got started in all this. How did you become so passionate about sustainability and the environment?
Sure. Well, I was living a fairly normal American life for most of my life, and my focuses were basically material possessions, money. My goal was to be a millionaire by the time I was 30 years old. Women and partying were definitely a big priority of my life through university in my early 20s. And I went to school for biology and aquatic science. And the thing was, I was always passionate about nature and the outdoors. But the big disconnect was that I didn't really know as a human being how my daily actions affected the world through, the food that I was eating, the gas I was pumping into my car, the car I was driving, the water I was drinking, the trash that I was creating, the waste that I was creating, just all the things that we deal on a daily basis. I had a complete disconnect with how the life of a human being through our daily actions caused an impact on the world. And then I started to watch a lot of documentaries and read books and just started to wake up to what's going on at that time in 2013, in the 21st century, the human experience, and just realized that my life was causing destruction to everything that I loved. Food Inc. and Earthlings were two of the really early documentaries that really woke me up about food, which was really one of the big first things, was just realizing my food's coming from factory farms where animals are being treated horribly, and monocultures of corn and soy that are causing rainforest deforestation and just depletion of our land and our soils. And so basically at that point I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to change my life, and that way be able to live a life I can actually feel good about, rather than having this pit in my stomach of what am I doing?
Right. And so it was more of a gradual process and a step-by-step process, rather than this, epiphany, this one moment that changed everything.
Yeah. Yep. I didn't have no overnight realization, no moment of enlightenment. I know a lot of people have those sorts of things, but for me, it was just education. And, that's one of the beautiful things about living in the time we do today, is that the information is out there to educate ourselves if we want to. So, I started to educate myself, and little by little, I just started to become more knowledgeable on, my life and how it affected the world. And so what I did is I just made a list of all the changes that I wanted to make. Again, a lot of them were about food, because food is 3 times a day. It's kind of one of the most important things for existence. So I started to, eat more whole foods, less packaged processed foods, started to shop at the local farmers market instead of going to big box stores like Walmart. Started to, eat a more plant-based diet. So I was at the beginning, my goal was to eat a completely plant-based diet 2 days a week, and then it moved to 5 days a week. And so, and then of course there were all sorts of other changes, like starting to ride a bike and drive the car less, starting to use reusable bags instead of plastic bags, growing food, so making all these changes. And it was just one change at a time. My basic goal is that I'd make one positive change a week. And after a couple of years of making positive changes, my life really was pretty transformed.
Yeah, no, that's something definitely that sounds feasible too, because I think what maybe a lot of people find daunting is taking these big steps, and it seems impossible with the jobs and the lives they lead. But if you make this list, and if you kind of do it systematically and you take it step by step, you realize with quite a not so much effort, you can get a lot done, and you can have quite a big impact step by step.
Exactly. And then the thing is that really it's all a mindset. We're talking about actual changes, physical changes. but ultimately, as you make these changes, what happens is a lot of times you become, for me personally, I became a lot healthier and a lot happier because of the changes I made. The idea was that I was making positive changes for the environment, but basically what I found is what's good for the environment is good for me. And so I became a lot happier and healthier, which made it easier to make more changes. But also my perspective on the world began to shift. What I thought was important began to shift. Money continued to lose its level of importance. Material possessions, ego, what people think about me, all of these things lost their importance. And instead, what became more important was health, was true happiness, was really living a life with true purpose and passion. And so those things like your standard job, which you're working to be able to pay the bills and have more stuff and have nicer stuff, sort of slowly fizzled away. Kind of fast, actually, for me. In a period of 5 years, I kind of totally changed my life. Yeah. But I found that those things that once were the center of my life continued to be moved more to the peripheral until eventually they kind of no longer are important to me at all.
Yeah. And I think one important point as well with your story definitely is that you then took the step, not only to make changes in your own lifestyle, but to really spread that message and to try and reach out to the community and to the wider global community really nowadays with these these amazing adventures you've been on. So could you maybe tell us a little bit about the kind of the first big adventure you went on and how that went and what that taught you?
Sure. Yeah. 2013, as I said, I had really started to feel like, after 2 years, I had made a lot of changes and I was actually feeling like I was the change that I wanted to see to a certain degree. And so I decided I wanted to really start to use my life as a way to impact others and inspire others. So I came up with a bike ride across the country from San Francisco to Vermont. It was 4,700 miles. The idea was to bike across the country, having as little of an environmental impact as possible, and kind of live sustainability to the extreme to really catch people's attention and get them to think, also catch mainstream media's attention and do sort of extreme things that deal with daily life, like food, water, energy, transportation, waste, with the idea of just triggering people to think about their own lives, the food they're eating, where their water comes from, where their electricity comes from, what happens to their trash when they put it in the trash can. And it was quite the adventure. And I learned a lot from it, and I was able to inspire a lot of people as well.
So like concretely, what kind of things were you doing? Like when it comes to, I don't know, spending less energy, or where did you get your food from? Like how did it work? How did you take things to the extreme?
So I had set basic rules for all of the key aspects of sustainable living. So for food, I could only eat local, organic, unpackaged food. So basically almost nothing you find at a typical grocery store. Local meant it was from within the state that I was in. Organic meant, it didn't have to be certified, but just organic practices, not sprayed with pesticides, no fungicides. And then unpackaged meant, it wasn't in a package unless it was a reusable one, like a glass jar that I could return or an egg carton that I could give back and they'd reuse. And so, what I found is that doesn't exist in a lot of places, that kind of food. And so The exception was I could eat food that was going to waste, which would be dumpster diving. And I had never been dumpster diving before, but I just started to look into grocery store dumpsters. And at first I was very timid, but quickly I was just blown away because what I found is, now I've been into 2,000 dumpsters across the nation in 30 states. And I've found that dumpster after dumpster after dumpster across the nation is just filled with perfectly good food. And when I say perfectly, I mean you could empty out your fridge and your pantry, go away for 2 days, come home, and I'd have it filled with everything. And you would never know that I didn't just spend a couple $1,000s at the grocery store.
Wow. And so you were just dumpster diving from state to state and just finding pretty much everything you needed, and then right there in the dumpster, just hop in, and with fruit, vegetables, whatever you needed?
Yeah, fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts. You can even get still cold, meat that's still frozen, dairy that's still cold, boxed foods like, granola bars and cereal, canned goods. I mean, pretty much everything. And, again, I was pretty, at the time, this was 4 years ago, I still had a much bigger ego than I did today. So I worried what people would think about me. So at first I wasn't very vocal about it, but as I continued seeing this, I just thought, I have to show this to people. So I just started to, come up with visual ways. Ultimately, I came up with a demonstration called the food waste fiasco, which is where I I go out dumpster diving for a day or two in a city, collect all the food I can, and then lay it out in a park in a beautiful display to show people this is just a tiny fraction of what's going to waste in one day in your city. So yeah, the other key aspects of sustainable living. So I talked about food, then you've got water, energy, waste, transportation. So for water, I couldn't use water from on the grid, so no showers, no faucets, no flush toilets, no washing machines. All of my water came from natural bodies of water, so I had a water purifier with me, and that's how I, drank water or used it for cooking. And then I just bathed in lakes and rivers every day. Or I also used wasted water, so if I found a leaky fire hydrant, that would be my shower for the day. And I did keep my clothes on, so I wasn't naked in the streets. And then energy, I had small solar panels with me, and that was all of the electricity that I used for the summer. Well, the idea was all the electricity I would use for the summer would come from those small solar panels. And I made some small exceptions, but I used about 1,000 times less electricity than the average person for the summer. And then transportation, the rule was I had to bike the entire 4,700 miles, no fossil fuel powered vehicles, not even public transportation on my day off. And then lastly, waste. Every piece of trash that I created, I had to carry across the country with me. So, basically the idea was by having to carry it with me, that would make me really careful about what trash I was making, because as anybody who knows who's cycled or backpacked, a pound makes a difference. It really adds up. So in that summer, I created just 2 pounds of trash, which is what the average person in the United States makes by about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and by what the average European typically creates in about a day is what I created in 104 days.
Wow. Well, that's a great way of doing it, because it really makes you, I guess, accountable for, you don't externalize your trash, you don't externalize what's essentially your impact and your responsibility, and you literally have to carry it on your back.
So a good exercise, I do extreme things, but I also like to come up with nice little smaller exercises that help people to be able to challenge themselves and start to understand their actions better. And so one challenge is just for one day or 1 week, but one day, just, no trash cans for a day, and no saying, okay, I'm not going to use this for today because I don't want to carry it. But instead, for one day, live your normal life and carry all your trash with you, and see what it looks like. Or do it, if you want to take the challenge further, for a week, just carry around a duffel bag. And you really start to get a picture when you practice these small exercises that help you to understand your life better. Yeah,
like how inconvenient, even for one day, I can imagine for most people it just feel super inconvenient, and then you realize what kind of trash you're creating. But on the topic of trash, I have to, the elephant in the room here is your Trash Me challenge that you did in New York City. Tell us what that was all about. I mean, you were known as the Trash Man. I think that's probably how most people in the States and a lot of people around the world know you as the Trash Man. Tell us what that is and what you did.
Sure. So that was the opposite of the bike ride. In the bike ride, I tried to create as little trash as possible, and I created just 2 pounds in 104 days. Well, Trash Me, the idea was I lived like the average American. I ate, shopped, and consumed like the average American. Basically just floated along in the breeze of American consumerism for a month. But the catch was I had to wear every piece of trash that I created. I had a specially designed trash suit made for me by this woman, Nancy Judd. And it had all these pockets and support so that it'd be able to hold the weight. In that month, I created 84 pounds of trash. So that's about 40 kilos of trash. And that was still 1/3 less than the average American does. So I wasn't able to keep up with that rate of consumerism. But basically, by the end of it, I was just one giant walking trash ball. And it was a really amazing project. I mean, imagine I was in New York City, largest city in the United States, and I couldn't go anywhere for more than 5 minutes without someone coming up to me, asking me what I was doing, wanting to learn about it, or having seen it on the news or a newspaper or something. So by the end of it, like, I was basically walking New York City and couldn't go anywhere without people having seen it already. So it was a successful campaign in really getting people to think about trash. In fact, there was one day where a lot of cool things happened. Like, there was one girl who walked up to me and she said, I was just sitting there eating my lunch, looking at the trash and thinking about you, and then you walked past.
That's great. No, and it really is a fantastic image. I mean, I followed you on Facebook throughout your challenge, and just seeing it pile up, day by day, hour by hour, almost, just the amount that you were carrying was, I mean, you could barely fit through a door by the end.
It was hard to fit through a door. I injured my shoulder. It took about 3 months for my shoulder to get healthy again, just from picking up that kind of weight and holding on to it. I mean, the rule was I had to wear it everywhere I went. So if I left the house, if I left the front doorstep to my house, or the apartment that we rented for the month, I had to wear the trash suit. And a lot of times my days were like 12 hours. I'd leave at 9 in the morning and not be back till 9 at night. So we're talking wearing 80 pounds of trash for 12 hours. It was very, very strenuous. But I have to say, it was one of the most enjoyable months of my entire life.
Yeah, you looked surprisingly happy throughout the whole experience. I mean, I'm sure we didn't, see all of the moments, but you looked pretty upbeat, and it was pretty impressive seeing you kind of smile your way through New York, because you were just this enormous tank of trash, essentially.
Kind of makes me want to go back there and do it again right now. Actually, that was almost a year ago. Yeah, September 19th, so just 11 months ago.
Yeah, you could maybe do it with like a few others. You could have a little trash me army of people just across New York or across the world, following in your footsteps. No, I thought it was brilliant, and it really stressed the point home, I think, more than any other way, really. So really, really great stuff. I wanted to talk a little bit as well about your more recent trip to Europe. I know you traveled across a lot of countries in Western and Northern Europe. So maybe tell us a little bit about why you left the States for this, and what your goal really was coming to Europe, and what your message here was, and what you did.
Sure, yeah. I was doing a TEDx talk over in Paris where we met May 20th or something like that of this year. And so I try to fly as little as possible and to make the flights worth it. So since I was going to go over there, I decided to make a European speaking tour out of it. And so I think I did 26 talks over a period of 7 weeks. And now I don't remember how many countries it was, 7 or 8 or 9 or something like that. And the tour was called Be the Change in a Messed Up World. And that's the name of the TEDx talk that I did. And it's really just, it's about, I think I've come to the realization that as an individual, I can't change the whole world, and probably no one that I ever meet will be able to change the whole world. It's unlikely. However, that's no reason not to care. It's no reason not to try to have a positive impact. It's like, okay, just because you can't be the best basketball player in the world doesn't mean you don't play basketball. So it's the same with trying to reduce our environmental impact, or to have a positive impact. We're not going to be able to be Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Mother Teresa But it doesn't mean we can't have a really positive impact on our community. And it doesn't mean that our actions don't matter. So, for example, by 2050, there's supposed to be as much trash in the oceans as fish. None of us are going to be the solution to that. However, maybe there's a pond in our neighborhood where the ducks swim and the kids play. We can clean the trash out of that and create a cleaner environment there. Or, maybe there's a stream that's filled with trash. You can do the same there. Maybe you can't grow food to feed the whole world, but maybe there's some hungry people in your community, and feeding them changes their whole world. And so, that's what it's all about for me, is living dignified lives that we can really feel proud of, where we can wake up in the morning and feel good about it, while having a positive impact in a manageable way around us.
Yeah, no, I think that hits the nail on the head. I mean, I think you get a lot of, you do stay positive, but you must get a lot of people that they're either not necessarily negative, but feel a little, like you said, they feel they can't change the whole world. And so if they feel their actions are not going to have any immediate impact, so they feel a little, lost or demotivated to do something about it. But definitely kind of, at least by, living up to your own principles and your own beliefs, you immediately have an impact on the people around you. And I think that's something that you've repeatedly shown, right? I mean, the people around you and the people you meet on your Trash Me Challenge, on your cycle across America, on all the other adventures that, we won't have time to talk about, that's something you must immediately get, right? It's this people that are faced with, some of the extremities that you're putting yourself, you're testing yourself with, and that feel inspired by that and feel inspired to impact their own communities.
Yeah, definitely. And, one of the things is a lot of people come to me with their big idea, wanting advice. And I've gotten this realization that people think that they have to start off with a bang and that their idea has to be huge right away. And that's not the way that it works. Like, for me to get where I got, I started with 0 followers. I didn't have a website. The media had never covered what I did. And, the first blog that was ever written about my first adventure, I paid someone $5 to write that blog for me. So it's all, and, at one point my Facebook page had 1 like. Everything has to start really small. And so, like, for example, if your goal is to feed people in your community, you don't have to be able to feed everyone. You can start with one little 4x4 foot plot in your garden, and then you can do another, and then another. And maybe your yard, you are able to, in a couple of years, go from using a part of your yard to the whole yard. Then you expand to your neighbor's yard. Maybe then you started a community garden. But most anybody who's really been successful with things like this will tell you that it starts small. But our generation today has this idea of like overnight success. And you can be overnight successful if you consider starting successful, which it truly is. Like, there's so many barriers that just starting a good project is a success. And when you think that way and you take it little by little, you're successful the whole time. It's not this giant success, but you can only get there by building it up a little bit at a time.
Yeah, I think especially your latest adventure, kind of, for me at least, sums this all up and sums up your philosophy and what you've been doing, and your community cross country bike ride, Green Riders. For me, really sums up your whole philosophy and what you believe in. Could you tell us, in detail what that was about? I know you've just finished that trip, so could you tell us what that was all about, what you did, and what you learned from it?
Sure, yeah. Green Riders was a community bike ride across the United States from New York City to Seattle, and it was open for anyone to join. And what we did is we planted. The idea was we were going to plant gardens and fruit trees, wildflowers for the bees, do trash cleanups and random acts of beautification and random acts of sustainability across the country, as well as be learning, visiting permaculture farms and organic farms and gardens and different places that could teach us about growing food and sustainability. And 32 people met in Central Park on May 29th, actually just a week after I saw you in Paris. And then total 48 people joined the bike ride throughout the summer. Some people joined for just a state. Some people did the whole ride across the country. Together, we cycled 87,000 miles, which is the equivalence of 3.5 times around the world.
Wow.
And we planted about 90 fruit trees, cleaned up 20,000 pieces of trash, rescued 5,000 pounds of food from grocery store dumpsters, and planted thousands of wildflowers and vegetable seeds across the country. So together, pretty small group of people, we're able to have a pretty nice impact, I think.
Yeah, that's quite a bit of impact. And was it something that was pre-planned? I mean, the farms you were going to visit, the organic farms, or was it quite organic in its approach, that it was a journey across the country and you kind of stopped in certain places and see what you could do?
A little bit of both. My plan was to have it all planned out in advance, just because with so many people, it's really good to have things organized. It was quite the endeavor finding hosts for 30 people for, an 82-day bike ride. So we stayed in like 66 different places because we had 16 rest days about. And then there was finding the volunteer projects and the, learning opportunities. So it turned out to be a lot of work. So a lot of things, some of them were set up a couple months in advance, and then a lot of things were just figured out that day where we'd be going that day. But generally we had a structure of which cities we'd be in at which day. And we got to Seattle on August 18th, which is the day that we planned. So no major catastrophes, and generally everything went pretty smooth.
And how do you feel having done that? And what's your your general feeling afterwards of having talked to people across the country? Are you hopeful with what you're seeing, with what people are doing, specifically here in terms of permaculture farms and organic farms and sustainability centers and all these kinds of movements around food? Was it quite a positive message you have coming out of the trip?
I generally do feel very positive about many things. The thing is, I've been focusing on sustainability for about 5 years now, which is obviously a relatively short period of time overall, but it's amazing how much I've learned and seen in the last 5 years. And one of the most beautiful things I've seen is that everywhere I go, I don't stick to just the bubbles, like the liberal bubble, like San Francisco type thing. Obviously, with bike rides across the country, you visit everywhere, places like Kansas and Nebraska and North Dakota, places that are, we went through deep Trump supporting country, for example. And everywhere that I go, I see more community gardens, more people doing front yard gardens, more community bike programs, more, programs to help feed people that might not have enough food, more people getting interested in alternative energy, paying attention to what they're eating. Basically, I see a vast sum of consciousness happening all over the United States and all over the world. Millions and millions of people are waking up to what's going on right now and are really becoming more conscious. And many people are taking action and making so many great programs in their communities and really getting involved. And even going through, again, places like Kansas and Nebraska and North Dakota, you see it happening. So it really is beautiful to see so many people waking up and so many people taking action.
And so in terms of kind of food and sustainability, you'd say, is that the future? It's decentralized, it's community based, it's communities looking at their problems and having their solutions and kind of very much on a small scale, but everywhere across the country and across the globe. Is that what you're seeing? Is that it's people are kind of taking matters into their own hands and going back to kind of the roots and the basics of organic farming and of sustainable farming? Is that what you say you're seeing?
Well, I see a lot of that, which is beautiful. But overall, what I see more of is more people becoming completely dependent upon a globalized food system, on a fossil fuel input food system, on a monoculture food system, and an unhealthy food system. So in reality, now, there's so much good going on out there, but in the reality, it is, in my opinion, a minority compared to the number of people that are really being still born into consumerism. 5 people are born every second and 2 people die. And I think a vastly larger number are being born into still the delusional Western dream than are being born into this idea of regeneration. So, I guess you have 2 realities happening right now. They're kind of sort of polar opposites. But I do see that the consumeristic way of and the convenience is actually growing more than the homegrown, the locally farmed movement.
But you continue to stay positive. I mean, that's
well. Here's the reason I'm positive. Going back to what we said before, none of us can change the whole world. I don't. Maybe somebody may, but none of us can probably change the whole world. None of us can overtake the entire food system or take down the fossil fuel industry. But, is that any of our responsibilities, being born 1 human in 7 billion? I would say no. Is our responsibility to do our best in our communities? I would say, yeah. And so whether or not the future becomes a more sustainable one or not, I can still be very positive with what I'm seeing around the country, in the sense that what I can be a part of is a positive movement forward. And I can't control everyone else, but I know that I can control myself. And I know that I can have a positive impact in the movements that I'm involved in. And, I think that's a life worth living and a life to be proud of, even if even if hypothetically the human race ceased to exist because of our own ignorance and our own inability to take the actions that we needed to live a sustainable life that could exist. Well, at least I would be one of the people that didn't sink that ship, the ship of the human race, that is.
That's true. Well, I really definitely hope we're not on the path of sinking, that we won't stay on the path, let's put it that way, of sinking the ship of the human race. But no, I think, what you're doing and the people that you're inspiring is definitely something that's, I hope, at least starting a global movement and a shift away from the reliance and the complete dependence really on fossil fuels, especially, like you said, when it comes to food. It's something, and this is why I started this podcast too. It's, for me, the most immediate impact I feel a lot of people can have is the way in which they consume and especially the way they consume food. It's something you do at least 3 times a day and has such an enormous impact on the environment, on other animals that we share the planet with, and also on people that are around the world producing the food for us. I mean, that's also something we have to keep in mind when we consume, is that we have an impact on the way producers can produce and what kind of living conditions they live under, and so putting all of that, having all of that in mind, what's next, Rob? What do you want to do next? What are your next projects? What are you looking forward to? And yeah, where do you go from here?
Well, my next big project is something that I'm really excited about. That's starting early next year. But before that, I'm in Washington now. I'm going to be on the West Coast for about 2.5 months. I'll be speaking in a couple different places. I'm around Vancouver, Washington, down to Portland, and down to San Diego, probably Los Angeles and San Francisco area as well. And I'll be doing some projects. So if anybody out there listening is in those areas, they can feel free to get involved. And then I'll also be touring the Midwest of the United States, some of Canada, and then I'll be back in Europe in November and December on another speaking tour. And then the really fun part, though, is when I get back to the United States in December, I'm starting a project. I think I told you about this last time we saw each other. For 1 year, I'm going to grow, forage, or hunt every single thing that I eat, down to the herbs, spices, even oil or salt. So everything that I eat for over a year will come directly from the earth, from my hands pulling it out of the earth. And I'm really excited about that.
You're stepping up your own game. You're really that's a great initiative.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things for me is I like to do things that haven't necessarily been done in the 21st century or the 20th century. Of course, this is just what the way life was for every human being on Earth for a long period of time. I mean, well, that dates back. It would have to be hundreds of years ago, of course, because the spice trade started quite a while ago. But basically, today, even when you go to countries where a large portion of the people have very little money, still most buy what are now commodities like sugar, flour. Like, for example, a lot of the places where they make tortillas, they don't grow the corn for their tortillas. They buy that because it's so cheap now.
Of course.
And so I personally don't think I've ever met a person who produces 100% of their own food ever. I would like to know if anyone listening, or if you find someone, send them to me. I would love to talk to them. But I don't know of that person existing. I've traveled to 45 countries, and I never have gotten word of anything like that. And I've hitchhiked through rural parts of many countries, and I just don't see it anywhere. So for me, it's going to be just going to be really interesting to see if it's possible. I believe it is. And I'm going to come out of it really learning a lot about food.
Exactly. And you're really taking, the concept of locavore diets, local diets to a whole new level. I mean, I tried in Paris just for a week a few months back, almost 6-7 months ago in the winter, a 100-mile diet for a week where I could only eat food that was produced within a 100-mile radius, which in the winter, at first was surprisingly difficult. I mean, in the end, I realized it's completely feasible, and more so as kind of the local movement, blossoms and increases around the world and becomes more fashionable. But I learned so much in that 1 week about food and about the kind of local farmers markets around me and about what's actually really available around you, at certain seasons of the year. But I feel like you're taking it to a whole new level, and I'm gonna love watching you take on that adventure.
Well, that's a really great challenge, though. I would definitely encourage anyone to do that 1 week, trying to eat only food within 100 miles of where they are. That is a challenge that will really help you to understand food. And I think one of the greatest things you can do is, take these short challenges. For example, if you're trying to live with less money, go out for 24 hours without your credit card or debit card or cash, just 24 hours without money. Maybe you're trying to get rid of your addiction to the cell phone and the computer. Just leave your house without your cell phone one day. I know it's something that a lot of us have never maybe ever done since we got our cell phones, but just go out without your cell phone. Or maybe try to do a week where you put your cell phone in your in a drawer where you can't access it. So there's so many different exercises that can really help you to become what you want to be, and to live a healthier life, maybe one that's less dependent on money, one that causes less destruction to the earth. And I definitely think the 100-mile diet for a week is a really great one.
Yeah, you're so right. These small micro challenges are great ways of, testing yourself. It's fun. You learn so much about kind of, the community around you. And yeah, you really, I mean, for me, at least personally, afterwards, it's also then, you force yourself, you put yourself into uncomfortable situations. You're out of your comfort zone. And by the end of the week, you adapt a lot of the changes you were forced to make, because you realize it's easier than you thought. Like you said, you feel better. You discover new fruits, new vegetables. You just discover this whole new world that you were never confronted with because of the convenience of modern day consumerism. So I'd say for everyone to take on micro challenges is a great way of kind of introducing themselves to sustainability and to kind of cutting down on what we really don't need.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, on that note, I'm going to make a blog of 10 micro challenges and hopefully have that out in the next couple of weeks. That's one I've wanted to make for a while. So I can send you the link when that's
perfect.
When that's
yeah.
up.
I was just going to ask you to, if you could have some suggestions of what people could do. That's fantastic. I'll include that then in the show notes if it's already out of the episode. If not, I'll be sure to share it with all the listeners because I think that's a fantastic way to go about it, and it's fun, and it's something you can do with friends, and it's a challenge, and I'd encourage everyone to do those types of things.
Absolutely.
Rob, do you have a place where people can follow you, see what you're up to, a Twitter and a Facebook account, and the website that you want to tell people about, so that they can, be sure to see this blog and all the other work that you've been doing and all the adventures you've been up to?
Sure. Yeah, my website's just robgreenfield.org. If you want to find me on social media, I use Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, and just type in Rob Greenfield and you'll find me. And my website is definitely a plethora of resources for living a more sustainable and just life. If you go to the blog, there's just endless things. There's my list of documentaries that I recommend, list of books, YouTube pages and Facebook pages for good information. There's the timeline of transformation, which is just robgreenfield.org/timeline, and that's kind of like my journey that we talked about. And there's just all these resource guides on how to eat healthier and use less water and electricity and create less trash, how to live a zero waste lifestyle. It's all on there. So yeah, definitely check those things out if you're interested in learning more. And then always stay tuned. I might be coming to a city near you or your city sometime in the near future. Or else, if you're in Orlando, Florida area, starting this winter, that's where will be my base, and I'll be hosting probably weekly workshops and things like that. So everyone will be invited to come hang out in person and get to spend some time together learning. That's awesome.
I'm jealous of everyone that's based in Orlando, but I look forward to hopefully seeing you in Paris in November, and good luck with your projects before then, and definitely after. I'll be sure to keep following you on Facebook with especially with what you'll be doing next year with your extreme local diet. Rob, thanks so much for coming on the show today. It's been a great pleasure having you.
All right, thanks for having me on, Mateo.
If you want more tips and tricks of how to live a more sustainable and just lifestyle, you can check out Rob's website. And on the For Food's Sake Facebook page, I'll be sharing Rob's blog post when it comes out about 10 micro challenges that everyone can try to live a more sustainable lifestyle. And if you want to learn more about the 100-mile diet challenge that I took on, you can check out episode 4 of the For Food's Sake podcast, The 100-Mile Diet, where I interview James McKinnon, who's the author of a book called The 100-Mile Diet. He took on a year-long challenge together with his partner, eating only a 100-mile diet. And you can check out episode 5, where I reflect on my week-long challenge of taking on the 100-mile diet in Paris. All right, well, that is all for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode or the podcast in general, the best way you can currently support the For Food's Sake podcast is by subscribing on iTunes, by rating and reviewing the show on iTunes, and then, of course, by sharing it with friends and family that you think might be interested. You can also follow the show and everything that we're up to on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The handle for all of those social media platforms is For Food's Sake Me. In our next episode, we'll be discussing 2017's World Sustainable Food Capital, which is the city of Valencia in Spain.
We have to manage ourselves, our communities, our cities. We are living a wonderful point in the history because in history, because civil society is in many different structures are showing to the governments what's the way. Civil society, because they have plenty of dignity. Of course, there are dark NGOs, dark foundations, but the global sense of civil society is we, the citizens, we know the solutions from many years ago. It doesn't matter, but we know the solutions. Please follow us. That's exactly what we would like to spread in this year in Valencia. I think we are on the right track, on the right line.
We'll talk about the vital role that cities play today in building sustainable local food systems that are diverse and healthy and that build a relationship between farmers, producers, and consumers that's lasting and meaningful.